Now that we have the basic understanding of the attribute warp node, how we can lay down these nodes and how we can write some attributes, work with noise. So we have built our foundation in the attribute warps. Let's learn about the Vex code as well. So the first thing that I want to talk about is the channels. So in here into the Vex expression, let's see what the channels are. So in the attribute warp node, here as you can see, we have created these parameters. So these parameters are also called the channels in the Vex. In here into the attribute warp, let me dive inside. Here as you can see, we have created these parameter node to export our these parameter in here. If I dive inside in here, if I want to create my own arbitrary parameter, I can create a parameter node in here, and in the parameter I just need to set the name of my parameter, and I'm going to call this one, let's say, my parm. And now if I go back and if I view the result, and here as you can see, we have successfully exported our this new parameter that is called the my parm. I can dive inside and I can rename this. Maybe let's rename this to my parm with the capital P. Let's go back, and here as you can see, our changes has been reflected. So right now this parameter does not doing anything, and that is because we are just creating it and we're not using it. It's just there, and here you can see its output is empty. We're not controlling nothing with it. But that's how you can create the parameter. So in here, if I want to, let's say, store these values into attribute, you know that we can create a bind export node. Can create bind export, and I'm going to rename this, let's say, value. I'm just creating a value attribute, and we just need to connect this in here. And now let's go back and let me go into the geometry spreadsheet, and here as you can see, we have this new attribute called value, and its value should be the same as we have the parameter. And here as you can see, if I adjust the parameter, this values has been changing. And let's see how we can create these same thing inside of the Vex. Maybe let's keep all of these things here, they're not hurting. Let's go back into the attribute wrangle, and if I middle mouse button, here as you can see, we currently do not have any attributes. We only have just P. So let's go into the attribute wrangle. You know that we can create the attribute by first assigning the data type. So if I were to create float, I just need to type the float f at now the name. I'm going to type this one name and just give him a value of 0 and the semicolon at the end to end the argument. Now we should see a value point attribute, and here we have it, value as a point attribute. And now let's see how we can create the parameter in the attribute wrangle in here. So to actually create the parameter, let me press enter, and onto the first line I want to, let's say, create a float parameter. And to create this, we need to type this ch, which means that we want to create the channel, and now we need to define the data type. And if we want to create a float parameter, we just need to type the f in here. So chf means the channel float, which means that we want to create a floating parameter. And now we need to create a braces, and inside of the braces we need to type the name. The name is referring to this name. Here as you can see, we have this one called my parm. So now we need to define the name of this parameter, and because name is a string, so it should be written in semicolons. So you can create double colon or single colon, both of them will work. So this time maybe let's just use the double colon, And in here I can type the name. I'm going to type this one, or my palm. So let's rename this, and we need to also add the semicolon at the end in here. So these we need to type the name inside of these quotation marks. And after that, let's add a breaker braces to close this, and to end the argument, let's add a semicolon and press enter. And here as you can see, our errors has been gone, which means that our syntax is correct. But right now I cannot see my parameter, and to actually create the parameter, we have this icon in here, and here as you can see, it says create spare parameter. So just click on it and it will create the parameter for us. And here as you can see, we have the my palm parameter, and here I can play around with this, and we have this parameter. And right now this my palm is not doing anything because we just creating the channel, and here we have it, and it's just there, it's not doing anything. So what we can do, we can write these values, these, let's say 0.27, we know that we are creating this parameter. But now let's store this value inside of the variables. What is a variable? So variable is the information that actually store inside of this VEX code. The way that we can create the variable is by first defining the data type. We need to type the whole data type in here. For example, if I want to create a float variable, I just need to completely type the name float, and here as you can see, and press space. First I have assigned the data type float, it must be written complete, and now the name of the variable, and I'm going to call this one maybe, let's say my var, my underscore var. Okay, that is my variable. And now we need to assign some values. So as you know, we need to add the equal sign, and for this time I'm going to just, let's say, add any random value, maybe 1 2, and end this with the semicolon. So we have successfully created our variable, floating type variable my var, and its value is 12, which means now I can call this value with just typing the name. So if I were to access the 12, what's stored inside of this, I just need to call this name. What does that mean? So let's say if onto the f at value, here we are creating the attribute, and here as you can see, we have the value as a attribute. And let's say I want to store this number, whatever inside of this variable. If I want to store this as a attribute and onto the value, right now I'm saying I'm just assigning a value 0. What I can do, I can just type the variable name. So in here I'm going to just call my variable, so that is called the my var. So I can just type my underscore var. So now our this at value attribute is equal to my var, and here as you can see, my var is a float and it has some values in it, and I can see the same value in my attribute value. I can check, go into the geometry spreadsheet, and we need to go into the points, okay, because we are creating the point attribute. And here as you can see, we have the value, and it's correspond to this value that we have stored. I can change this, maybe let's change this to a value of 16, and here as you can see, we have this 16 as a attribute, which means I don't need to manually type number in here. I can just add this argument, this channel float, which means that because we know that this channel is actually storing our this information, this parameter information. So onto the my var, I'm going to just delete this, and I'm going to just copy all of this, and in here I'm going to copy this text, and in onto the equal just paste it. And here as you can see, when we paste it, we have these two semicolon. We just remove one semicolon, we only need one. And now in here, I'm going to just remove this because we don't need this. Let me clean some of these lines. Let's click in here. And now we should see this value in our attribute. Let's go into the geometry spreadsheet. And here you can see we have the value. And I can play around with this parameter. And here you can see we are storing this as an A attribute. The way that we are working, first we are creating a variable name myvar. First we need to define the data type, that is a float myvar, and it's equal to the channel. This line here is creating the channel, the floating point channel, and we have the name of this channel, this parameter name myparm, and we have some values that is responsible for this part. And all of the information are now stored in the myvar, and we are calling these values inside in here myvar, and we are writing them as an A attribute. So variable is an A type of information that live inside of your code, which means that if I were to create another attribute wrangle, and in here if I were to call my same myvar, this myvar in here, I can't. So let's say I'm going to create another attribute. I'm going to call this one f at. I'm going to just call this one maybe result. I'm creating a result attribute, and if I were to call my variable, we know that we have called this variable, let me see, myvar. I'm going to call this one myvar and the argument with the semicolon, and here as you can see we still have the error, and the error is that this attribute wrangle cannot find the myvar variable because we do not have defined this myvar variable up here. So variable is a type of information that live inside of this code. All of these information are inside of this code. I can access them in anywhere down the line. For example, if I want to create, let's say, another attribute, this time I'm going to call this one, create another floating point variable f at debug. I'm writing another, and this time I'm calling myvar again. Let's call this myvar and add this with the semicolon. And here as you can see we have the debug and value. Both of these are the same because we are retrieving the information from myvar, and myvar is storing this value. That's basically what the variables and the attributes are. And I can create an integer variable as well. So the syntax for that is we need to type the int. And here as you can see, it is our syntax color has been changed to blue, which means we are creating the argument for our variable. And now we need to just set the name. I'm going to call this one maybe my int. Okay, that is the name. And for this one, right now I'm just storing a value of 1 and at the argument. So we have successfully created our integer variable. Right now it's not doing anything, but we have some information in here. And in here, if I were to create my string, I just need to type the string in here. And now the name of the variable, I'm going to call this one my string. And in here, because it's a string, it must be written in colons. So I'm going to type a colon, let's say hello world, and this, and to end the argument, as always, at the semicolon. So we have all of these three variables that store some information, but right now we are not using them, but that's how you can create the variables. And we can also create the parameter. And here as you can see, we know that how we can create the attribute with this. First we need to define the data type and the @ sign for the attribute. Now let's see how we can create different types of parameter. Right now we have created this one, channel f, and in here, let's say if I want to create an integer parameter, Right now I'm storing this as NA1. Let's say if I want to expose this as NA parameter to set these values. To create an integer value, first we need to type ch, which means the channel, and now the data type, and the data type for integer is I. Just type I, and we need to add a bracket in here, and now we need to define the name. I'm going to call this one, let's say, my int, and we need to end this in the colon, and we also need to add a closing bracket, and lastly we need to add the semicolon. Just click on it, and to update this parameter, just click on this button, and here you can see we have successfully created our another parameter. And same way, if I want to create a vector parameter, I can just type ch, which means the channel, and now I want to create a vector, so let's type v, chv channel vector. And now inside of the braces we need to define the name. I'm going to call this one my vector, my underscore vec, and we need to add this inside of quotation and close the braces and add the semicolon to end the argument. And to actually update this parameter, just click on it, and here you can see we have our my vector, and it has 3 components. I can individually define the x, y, and z. So that's the basic syntax of creating these parameters and creating the variables and attributes. And as you know, if you want to create these parameters, it's much easier to just go into the attribute warp node, and let's dive inside. And in here you can see we are creating a float parameter. And same way, if we want to create an integer, we just need to define the type. In here I'm going to say int, and we should have a integer, my palm as a integer. And if I want to create another parameter, I just need to create a parameter node, and inside the parameter we just need to type the name. For example, this time I want to create a string. I'm going to name this my string, and now we need to define the type of the data. And in here you can see we have the string. Just click on it. Now if we go back, and here as you can see we have the my string, and in here I can type anything, and that will be stored in here. And same way, just need to create another parameter. I'm going to call this one vector, so I'm going to rename this to my vec for my vector, and we just need to define the type. So let's change this to vector. Now if we go back, and in here we should see our my vector, these parameter, and all of these values are now stored inside of this parameter, and we can output them by connecting this out node. I can keep adding these parameter node to create the parameter in here into my this attribute warp node to play around with this data. And same way you can do this with these vex code by creating these channels and storing them inside of your variable.